pages of my book Charlie by Jason William Lee. Hope you enjoy. After a few more minutes, they saw the ball flying through the air, but it didn't look like an egg unless it was a golden one. Wow, look at that, said Charlie, as the golden-coloured golf ball rolled to a stop in front of their eyes. Neither one of them had seen a golden-coloured ball before, or even heard of one. They were entranced as if it held a spell over them. I want that ball, Tinker. What you can't steal, that would be wrong, said Charlie. I know it's wrong, said Tinker, but I don't care. I still want it. And I'm going to get it, he explained worryingly. Charlie could see the men coming down the hill looking very jovial, but that wouldn't last. When he looked back, Tinker had sprinted into the middle of the fairway. Charlie watched frozen as he plucked the ball off the crisp grass, and then he ran back with the shouts of the angry golfers ringing all around them. The shouting grew louder as the golfers realized that the boys weren't going to throw the ball back again. Charlie felt guilty. He had never stolen anything in his life, and the last thing he wanted was to get into any trouble. Throw it back, came a loud cry, and Charlie could see the gesticulating golfers running towards them with red faces. He doubted they had ever run so fast in their lives. They were furious. He turned round to admonish Tinker for taking the golf ball, but Tinker was already running through the woods like a frightened rabbit. Charlie had no option but to follow him. It was exciting, but he'd never been so frightened in all of his life. He began to daydream, and slowly, ever so slowly, the woods disappeared like smog, and so did all the shouting. Once again he was his alter ego, Spider-Man, and he shot his web from branch to branch, and he easily left his assailants behind in his mind. He could see Tinker in the distance, and he smiled at the craziness of the situation. He saw a large tree in the distance, and he decided to go for it. Just as he was about to let fly, he was brought back to earth literally. He never saw the log until it was too late. Hello, viewers! And he fell into a fog of brambles, and he desperately tried to scramble to his feet. The shouting and the footsteps of the golfers grew nearer. I'm done for, he thought, dejected. It was difficult for him to focus, and his eyes stung from the dot leaves. He wondered what his mum would say when he was caught stealing, especially from such an auspicious club. It would ruin his reputation. Chapter 74, The Hand of Fate. It was then that a muscular hand grabbed out to him, and he had no choice but to hold it. This is it, he thought. I'll be tired and feathered now. But it wasn't a mad golfer. It was Bob. Hello, Louise. Charlie was shocked. How funny seeing you here, said Bob, and he grinned his lopsided grin and showed off his yellowing, cracked teeth. Charlie wasn't sure who to worry about the most, but he knew that he had no choice but to follow Bob, as the golfers were now crashing through the woods like startled deer. Charlie imagined what they would do to him and how angry they would be. After all, he had spoiled their game. Then he remembered that it wasn't his fault at all, and his thoughts returned to Tinker. For the first time he was angry at him for all the trouble he had caused. All Charlie had wanted was a nice walk in the woods, and what he had ended up with was all this drama, and now it looked like it was going to get even worse. Bob led Charlie to the safety of his caravan, but Charlie didn't feel particularly safe. He was wary of Bob. He didn't think he was dangerous, but he thought he was strange. As soon as they got into the caravan, Bob put the kettle on, and Charlie sat on an old abandoned battered sofa. It was strewn with newspapers, but there was no comics in sight, which wasn't surprising. Charlie removed a tea bag from beneath him, and he surveyed the clutter around him, amazed. It was like a museum for rubbish, he thought. There was a small black and white TV in the corner, a bottle of beer balancing precariously on top of it. There was a once white rug beneath his feet, which was going slowly brown, with dirty footprints and whatnot. The walls were plastered with old newspaper photographs of horses and busty women. This didn't surprise Charlie. The floor was littered with slips of paper which looked like receipts, but Bob didn't look like the kind of person who liked buying things. Scrounging or stealing things more like, thought Charlie, amused. Hello, viewers. How many sugars, said Bob loudly, making Charlie jump. One, thanks, he said, and Bob brought the drinks in on a very dirty tray. Charlie drank his tea nervously and he struggled to make eye contact with Bob. Bob sensed this. Don't worry, son, I ain't going to hurt you, he said. Hello, viewers, please sub me if you like it. Now then, what have you done to make them golfers go mad and chase you halfway into the woods? Charlie felt ashamed and he reddened a little. The book is Charlie by Jason William Lee on Amazon Co. UK. The earth is flat, yes sir. It wasn't me, it wasn't all Tinker's fault, he spluttered. Bob was intrigued, but he was still none the wiser. What did he do? Bob said, getting a little exasperated. He stole a golf ball, said Charlie quietly. A golf ball, said Bob, and he sent a mouthful of hot tea onto his already stained white rug. Now look what you made me do, he said in mock horror. He took another sip of his very sweet tea and very black tea. I know that they take their little game of golf seriously, but why would they be so upset about a little golf ball, he said. I'm sure they have got plenty of them in their bags, he said, shaking his head. Charlie spoke without thinking. It wasn't an ordinary golf ball, it was a golden golf ball. This made Bob laugh louder than he'd ever done. A golden golf ball, he said. I've heard everything now, he said, smiling, revealing a row of fillings. If it's gold, I promise, said Charlie, and it rolled right in front of us like a present from above, and Tinker could not resist. It was if he was mesmerized, he added, wide-eyed. Ian from EastEnders, what the hell? Bob was still chuckling. A golden ball, he said. It must be worth millions. Make no wonder silly snobs run after it, he said sarcastically. Charlie was amused and he found himself laughing despite his best efforts. Maybe Bob isn't so bad after all, he thought. Charlie composed himself. I'm not daft enough to think that it was made out of solid gold, but it was definitely painted a gold colour, he said. And it looked beautiful, he said without shame. I believe you, said Bob as he finished his tea and he wiped his mouth with his too big dusty jumper. Lovely brew that, he said. Hello viewers, please sub me. Bob peered through the dirty curtains to make sure that they had gone. When it was safe, he said to Charlie, I think it's safe to come out now. Charlie was grinning like a cat when he came out despite himself. That was so funny, he said to Bob, and they finished their tea in silence. Thank you, Sophia. A thought came to Charlie. In all of the excitement, he had forgotten about Tinker. I wonder how he's getting on, he said to Bob. I wonder if he's gotten away. I'm sure he has, said Bob, and scratched his unshaven chin. I doubt them old sod can keep up with a spring chicken like him. Charlie nodded in agreement, and he hoped Tinker was safe at home. Tinker would also be relieved and surprised that Charlie was safe in Bob's caravan all this time, and he couldn't wait to tell him. Charlie went to put his cup in the sink. Don't worry, said Bob, I always wash them once a month. Charlie laughed and shrugged, and he felt that he had found a new friend, albeit a strange one. Gareth, I'm a look-alike. Charlie laughed and shrugged, and he felt that he had found a new friend. What have you got all of these receipts, he asked. Have you been treating yourself? Well, said Bob, rubbing his chin, they're not for girls, they are slips, he said, explaining, betting slips. I'm a betting man, he said proudly. What do you bet on, said Charlie, who had no idea about these things. Horses, said Bob. I love me horses, said Bob enthusiastically. Now Charlie had seen horse racing on TV, but he'd never met anyone who was interested in them, and he immediately began to ask questions. Turning the page. Oh dear, dear, dear. Oh dear, dear, dear. It's quite hard to turn the bloody page. Atmosphere. Bob was such an interesting character, and he knew so much. Charlie listened avidly as he gave him a potted history of horse racing. Charlie listened for a good 10 minutes, and then he was bursting to ask a question. Have you ever won much money? Asked Charlie. Hundreds, said Bob. How do you think I manage by not working? Charlie suspected he didn't work, but he was too polite to say anything. "How do you know which horse is going to win?" said Charlie. "With me knowledge," he said with a knowing wink, and he pointed to the row of books, which Charlie had failed to notice behind all of the dust and the clutter. Charlie got closer. As he blew away the dust, he could clearly see that every book and magazine was dedicated to horses. Charlie reached out to touch one. "Do not touch," said Bob. "They're all in order, and I don't want you to rub off their magic," he said sternly. He wasn't joking. "I checked the form," he added. "What's the form?" said Charlie, sitting back in his chair. "Absolutely zero testosterone." "That's good." "Yes, Bob, it never ends. I read them, and I then reread them every day," Bob replied, looking pleased with himself. Charlie thought that sounded very boring, but he kept that rude thought to himself. "Don't you get much time to watch television?" he asked in wonder, and then looked at the rather dusty TV. "I never watch it," said Bob. In fact, it doesn't work," he said. "I use it just to rest my cups on," he replied. Charlie thought this was a bit odd, but he wasn't going to say anything. "125, 126. Dennis Taylor, who was that?" Once again, he was dazzled by its beauty. It was definitely a keeper, he thought. It was the first thing he'd ever stolen. Oh my God. Just looking for the page. What the hell? Okay, viewers, nighty night. See you later. Please, thanks for subbing me.